There's three teams left for two spots in the NL wild card. The Braves, Mets, and Diamondbacks. Who gets in? We'll tell you on this episode of First Pitch. Yes, welcome on into First Pitch for Monday, September 30th. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rauh. You can follow him on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. And Christian, we thought the regular season would be over. We thought this would be the playoff preview episode. We've got two more games because of weather last week. The Braves and Mets play a doubleheader today to decide the National League wild card. And it didn't have to be this way. Everything broke perfectly, I guess, wrong if you're the Braves or Mets, or right if you're a baseball fan and want to watch more baseball, to make these games have to happen. The Braves would have clinched yesterday with a win or a Diamondbacks loss. The Mets would have clinched with a win and a Diamondbacks loss, and that would have been the combination to not need baseball today. But Mets win, Diamondbacks win, Braves lose to the Royals 4-2. So we get two games today. Before we get into what happens in these games and how that changes the playoff picture, are you excited to get these two more games, or did you want to see two teams with 160 game schedules?
I think overall, I'm excited. I mean, it would have been nice to have maybe one day before the postseason, just kind of collect myself and prepare for the postseason. And then also, if we get both the Braves and the Mets in, we might see two lackluster NL wild card, races because they didn't have a day off as well. So I think
not only did not have a
overall,
day off, they'll play two games and then fly out tonight to go
Right.
to the new cities. It's everybody else could have traveled last night.
Yeah, and one of them is going, to possibly to San Diego. So yeah, it's I think overall, I think I'm excited just because as a baseball fan, like you look for stuff like this. You want it to come down to the wire. You don't want to have, blowouts and 162 and things like that not matter. So overall, I'm excited, but I do know the repercussions, and I think that might hurt us moving down the stretch here in the following weeks.
Yeah. So, okay. So the way that this is going to work schedule-wise, game one is scheduled for, I believe it's 1:10 p.m. Eastern time today. If you are local to Atlanta or New York, that's being carried on the traditional broadcasters, Bally Sports South and SNY. So they will have the games locally. ESPN has picked up the non-exclusive rights for the rest of the country. So everybody can watch these games. But if you are not in those if you are in those markets, it's your traditional broadcast. Game one, the Braves are throwing Spencer Schwellenbach, the young rookie who has been just absurdly impressive this season. And if you look at his experience against the Mets, he's been really good this year against the New York Mets. It's been something where they just haven't really been able to figure him out. In two starts, it's 14 total innings. He's 2-0 with a 0.64 ERA. He's given up 5 hits. The one run was on a solo home run from Mark Vientos in the 7th inning of the second start. So it took 14 innings for them to tag him for a single run. He's walked 1. He struck out 15. And the only reason that they are able to throw a pitcher that good against the Mets is because they have saved Chris Sale. He was supposed to start game 2 of this series last week before it got rained out. And they have said, we're going to throw Chris Sale when we are facing elimination. So if the Braves win game 1, I have no idea what's going to happen in game 2, but it's not going to be Chris Sale. They're going to save Chris Sale for the wild card. If the Braves lose game 1, they'll throw Chris Sale in game 2, and then you're scrambling to figure out a game 1 starter for the wild card because Max Fried would be on regular rest for Wednesday, game 2, and Ronaldo Lopez on Thursday's game 3 if it's needed. So do you think Schwellenbach's going to continue his run of great performances against the Mets, or are you concerned because his last start 6 days ago was against these same Mets?
I'm not concerned about Spencer Schwellenbach. I have developed a huge amount of confidence in him over the past couple starts watching him play. His only iffy start was, out of the last 5 or 6 was on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball, and he still looked really good. So, I don't have too much concern about Spencer Schwellenbach. I think the Braves are going to get it done initially. I think what's really exciting, what's really going to be the big question mark is what happens in that game two, Lindsay. Let's say if the Braves win that first game, how serious are the Braves going to take game two? Because to me, that is the biggest question. Like, are they gonna fight to keep the Mets out, or are they gonna just move on and focus their efforts towards knowing they got to fly to San Diego in just a few hours?
Yeah, and to kind of, I guess, go a little more into that. So the Atlanta Braves right now are either the 5 seed or they go home. The way this works, they have the tiebreaker right now over the Mets because it's head-to-head record, and they won Game 1 of that series last week. So the Braves have the tiebreaker. If you split today, both teams are in. Atlanta would have one more win head-to-head versus the Mets, tied on record. The Braves would go to San Diego. The Mets would fly back to Milwaukee to take on the Brewers again, who they just finished the series with. If the Mets sweep or the Braves sweep, the Diamondbacks are in. The Diamondbacks are the 6 seed. They are locked into the 6 seed. If they get in, they cannot be the 5. So in that case, they would fly to Milwaukee, and the Mets are the only team that can change the seeding. If the Mets win game 1, they probably punt game 2 because, again, if they sweep, they have to go to San Diego and take on the Padres. And I think right now, apologies to our listeners who are Brewers fans, I think you would rather face the Brewers than face the Padres. Something where the Brewers have just been, the Padres have just been one of the hottest teams in baseball down the stretch. It's like them and the Tigers. That bullpen looks to be the most formidable bullpen left, like in baseball, them and the Guardians. And it feels like you would rather face the Brewers than the Padres. That could be, a mistake in a week when we talk about this. We come back and talk about this, but whoever wins game 1, I don't expect them to throw a ton of quality, especially not their bullpen arms in game 2, simply because, you want to get, neither team has an incentive to either burn those guys or to get the sweep and end up having to face the Padres. Although, like I said, Atlanta's locked into that.
You don't have to claim or call out your extra man until the second game of the doubleheader, correct?
You actually, and I think I got this wrong with you when we were talking offline last week, because you're in September, the rosters are already expanded. You do not get an additional man for today.
Oh.
But I did confirm with somebody, if you option someone down and call someone else up between games this morning or whatever, the player option down is still eligible for the wild card roster. So
Okay.
anybody with options here, you can make a move to get extra men for game 2. You could theoretically option down 2 or 3 players and bring up 2 or 3 different players if you just wanted somebody, like you wanted some new arms or whatever. I can see the Braves. They have 2 optionable relievers in Daysabel Hernandez and Dylan Lee. Hernandez and Lee both pitched yesterday. They also have position players with options. Jared Kelnick, for instance. Spencer Schwellenbach has an option. So technically, and he's already popped his option year because he was called up this year. You technically could option Spencer Schwellenbach to the minors after game 1 and replace him with somebody else for game 2. So both teams have some flexibility to get guys, but it's not going to be a designated extra man because of September roster rules.
I think we're going to be in for seeing some sort of crazy roster move like that. For whoever wins game 1 is going to
Mm-hmm.
have something like that in the middle before the other game starts. These teams are working hard right now, and the scenarios that they have built up to decide like what happens when they win the first game or lose the first game are,
Mm-hmm.
are going to be wild. And I think we're going to see something that we've probably never seen before in baseball today between
Yep.
games compared on who wins that first game. So if you are a baseball fan, which you are if you're watching this show, I do
Yep.
recommend that you pay attention to what's going on with that Braves and Mets series and get yourself a cold drink, but don't walk too far away from your TV between the double headers because you're going to get some interesting roster moves right away in between those games.
Okay. And then kind of breaking down the rest of the NL postseason picture real quick. Dodgers are the 1 seed, Phillies are the 2 seed. So again, Milwaukee's the 3, they'll face the 6. Padres are 4, they'll face the 5. The winner of Padres and whoever they face will take on LA. So that's going to be another West Coast series because LA will have home field advantage there. You do get some home games in the DS, so they will come back to Atlanta or New York or whoever. But it could be at LA versus San Diego. We'll see what happens. The other series will be the winner of Brewers in the 6th seed will face the Phillies. And the schedule for these, both of the wild card games in the National League are the late games on Tuesday. So the AL games will go first. We'll get to those matchups in a second. And then after that, you'll have the 3rd seed, or you'll have the 3rd wild card at Milwaukee. It'll be 5:30 on Tuesday. And then you'll have the 2nd seed in the wild card versus San Diego at 8:40 on Tuesday. And then those schedules are a little bit similar on Wednesday. The NL wildcard games are the 2 later games. Milwaukee will start at 7:38. San Diego will start at 8:38. So concurrent games there, with the 2 day games being the AL games. And then Thursday, those NL wildcard games again are the late games. Part of this is time zones, but part of this also is trying to accommodate these 2 teams playing on Monday, having to play 2 games and flying out late, giving them as much time as possible before they have to take the field.
This is gonna be a crazy schedule between today and tomorrow, but it's going to be some really fun baseball. Playoff baseball is my absolute favorite of all the sports. I think playoff baseball is my favorite because it's not win or go home, sure, but it's a chess match, and it's
Right.
exactly what I'm here for. And I cannot wait for. Really, we're in it now because these 2 games mean playoff baseball. But I really cannot wait till tomorrow.
Okay, so if you're having to pick right now, who were the 2 NL wildcard teams, or who the 2 teams that get the last 2 NL wildcard spots? What is your pick? Braves, Mets, Diamondbacks. Give me 2.
I think we're gonna get a series split today, and I think it's gonna be we're gonna get the Braves and the Mets in. So I think the playoff series are going up gonna be the Mets versus Brewers and Braves versus Padres. And it's gonna be a wild scenario in that game too. Whoever wins that first game, they're gonna punt to let their division rival make it in because they're gonna be more focused on themselves, worried about the next day in the postseason. It's gonna be a crazy scenario today, but I'm going series split. Diamondbacks are gonna have to watch that just suffer while sitting on TV watching that doubleheader.
Worst thing for the Diamondbacks, I think these are the most wins they've had in a series since, or in a season since sometime last decade, and they might not even make the postseason. That's always frustrating. I do also have it as a series split. I do think Atlanta takes game 1. We don't know who New York is starting as of right now for game 1, but it feels like I just have a feeling that Schoenbach's going to continue to show out against the Mets. He's going to win, and we'll see whatever they decide to do for game 2. Okay. The AL bracket, however, unlike everything else, the AL bracket was decided yesterday, and it was set yesterday. So your first game on Tuesday, and again, tomorrow's show is going to be dives into all of these games, previews, and everything. But game 1 is Detroit at Houston. So Detroit has the 6 seed. Houston has the 3. They will take each other on. That's the early game because it's funny. It's in Central Time. So it starts at like 1:30 Houston time. After that, Kansas City is the 5. Will go to Baltimore at 4:08 Eastern. And they'll play the Orioles. 1, should these times have been flopped? And 2, how do we feel about these 2 matchups?
Yeah, I think the time should have been flopped. Just makes more sense that way. But with the matchups, I mean, I am super excited. I thought I really wanted to see Detroit in Baltimore. I'm not going to lie because that
Me too.
series last weekend was really good. Maybe
It
we'll
also
still get
helps
that.
that we've both written some freelance pieces for both of those sites on Sports Illustrated, so that helps too.
That also does not hurt. However, Corbin Burns versus Cole Reagans sounds insane. Framber Valdez versus Tarek Skubal sounds insane. We are going to be in for some great baseball to get the wild card round set up. I know we're going to make our predictions next or tomorrow's episode, but the Astros, obviously, they've won a couple of World Series, they've been to the ALCSs in multiple seasons since they've done that. They have not lost a first round playoff matchup, Lindsay, since losing the NLDS. Yes, I said the National League Division
Yeah,
Series in 2001.
gross. Yeah, it's definitely an uphill climb for the Tigers. I do like Kansas City's odds a lot better than a lot of other people do, though, as far as Kansas City versus Baltimore, simply because Baltimore has struggled since the All Star break. I want to say I think they're close to a losing record. I'm
Yep.
not All Star break, trade deadline. I believe they're close to a losing record since the trade deadline. So but yeah, it's tough road for Detroit, but at least it's like the hottest team in baseball. Detroit has been nuclear down the stretch, and so it'll be exciting to see that kind of matchup there.
Gunnar
I do think,
Henderson versus Bobby Witt Jr. I mean,
ah, that's
yeah.
such a great storyline there. I mean, tons of fun. This is gonna be great.
The two
I'm
rebuilding teams. Last year, the Orioles, before they won their 100 wins, was a 100-loss team. They flip. The Royals did the same thing last year. They get to the playoffs. Now they go against each other in the first round. So, yeah, it's exciting. There's a lot of fun storylines that you can already develop into these two matchups.
There absolutely are. Okay, let's jump into quick pitch real quick because we've got a lot of kind of statistical stuff to go over now that the regular season is virtually done, right? Luis Ariz, for instance, he technically has not already clinched the batting title. I think Marcelo Zuna needs 9 hits on Monday to pass him, but he's in essence clinched the batting title. Batted 314 to 738 OPS, 4 homers, 9 stolen bases. I got a couple questions on this. The first, but I do want to make a quick clarification for a lot of people. A lot of MLB Twitter accounts and things like that are getting this wrong. They're saying he's the first player in Major League Baseball history to win a batting title with a third team. And I think the confusion here is because Elias Sports only goes back to 1900. In the 19th century, Dan Brothers won he won 5 batting titles with 4 teams because he won it with Buffalo in 82 and 83. He won it with Boston in 89. He won it with a different Boston team in 91. And he won it with Brooklyn in 92. So Ariz, he's the first player to win 3 consecutive batting titles, I believe. And he's the first modern player to win 3 for 3 different teams. But he's not the first player in MLB history. He's just the first modern player. I do love the symmetry, though. This is now called the Tony Gwynn Award.
As it should.
Obviously, former Padres, great Tony Gwynn. He won 8 of them with the Padres. But Ariz is the first Padres player to win one since Tony Gwynn won one in 1997. How huge of an achievement is this, or is it really a huge achievement?
I think it's a huge achievement for sure. And doing it on different teams is, I think, exciting. I don't think that really matters because you're playing your game regardless. You play 162 just like the rest of the teams.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I mean, it's you have to make the moves. Like I think this year was more impressive because he was traded at the middle of the season, going from the East Coast to the West Coast. So I find
Mm-hmm.
that impressive if you're gonna look at it for different teams. But overall, leading all of baseball in batting average 3 years in a row is super impressive. And I know that he's not a guy that's going to get you a lot of home runs. His slugging percentage isn't crazy. He's not the guy that you think of first when you think of as some of the best players in all of baseball, uh, because he's not that kind of player. But
Right.
there's still room for a guy like Luis Ariz in this baseball league, and he's proving it. And he's proving the reason that for that is because he keeps winning this dang award. So no, I think it's super impressive. And the Padres got an absolute steal, and I think we all know that they got an absolute steal before the trade deadline this year. Really, months before the trade deadline from the Miami Marlins.
Yeah, he goes 1 for 3. Was removed from that game after getting that hit in his third at bat. He got a double, his 32nd of the year. That actually gave him exactly 200 hits on the year. It is the second consecutive season he has done that. He won it with 173 and 22. He had exactly 203 last year and 200 this year. So shout out to Luis Ariz. Shohei Ohtani gave him a run for his money, though. Ohtani finishes 310, had a 1.36 OPS. Both of those led the National League. 54 homers led the National League. 59 stolen bases. His 134 runs and 411 total bases led all of baseball. And have you heard of the concept of bases gained versus total bases?
Now, let me know about that.
Okay. So total bases is the bases you get off of hits. It only counts hits, right? So Shohei's 411 total bases is ridiculous, right? But people talked about this, the bases gained last year, which was total bases plus stolen bases plus walks plus hit by pitch. It's all the ways you can advance yourself around the bases with no additional help, right? Everything that's within your power, somewhat. Hit by pitch is not really in your power, but things are within your power. Shohei Ohtani finished with 557 bases gained because he had 411 total bases, 59 steals, 81 walks, and 6 hit by pitches. That is the 6th highest total in MLB history. And the list ahead of him is Babe Ruth 3 times, Barry Bonds once, Lou Gehrig once. So, I'm sorry, he's technically tied for 6th with Jimmy Fox. So Jimmy Fox as well. But that list of people, and by contrast here, Ronald Acuna Jr. was number 12 on the list last year with 545. Aaron Judge finished 14th now with 544. Hearing that, is Shohei Ohtani's season more impressive? Or is that just, it's a made-up stat, it was already a great season anyway, just going 54 and 59?
His season is not impressive at all, Lindsay, because he's a DH. No.
I see what you did.
Could you imagine people actually having that argument? Oh, wait, people are having that argument. Yeah, this is super impressive. And the made-up stat portion, I mean, there's a lot of stats that you could say are, quote, made up when you're talking about sabermetrics.
Technically, all stats are made up.
Right. You know, I mean, mathematics is made up. So,
yeah.
No, I do think this is impressive. I think that is a really impressive stat. I hope we start using that more because that is valuable. That's a valuable piece saying how many bases that you picked up on your own. And that's a good one to look at when you're looking at MVP races, when you're looking at an individual performance. So no, I definitely think that adds to more of the impressive run that Ohtani has. And regardless of if he's DH or left field or pitching or whatever, this has been a super impressive season by Shohei Ohtani, and there should be no other argument otherwise.
And to contextualize some of these great home run years, Babe Ruth, leading the list, 1921, had 623 bases gained, and 01, the year of his home run streak, had 610. Just kind of contextualize here.
That's insane.
Some of these, although both of these guys, they walked over 145 times. So I think that's also part of it. They hit a ton of home runs. They also walked a bunch. They combined in those seasons for only 30 stolen bases. So I think a big part of that and why they're so far ahead of Ohtani is all of those walks. Okay. And I mentioned Ohtani gave him a run for his money. 12-game hitting streak to end the season for Ohtani. Batted .547 in that streak. 29 of 53. 7 homers, 22 RBIs, 11 stolen bases to only 9 strikeouts. So just absurd, right? Okay. This is not official because we're waiting to see if Chris Sale has to pitch today for Atlanta or if he's held to the wild card. But it looks like we're going to have 2 Triple Crown winners. Chris Sale right now, 18-3, 2.38 ERA in 29 starts, 225 strikeouts. Tariq Skubal, 18-4, 2.39 ERA, so 0.01 behind Sale. 31 starts, 228 strikeouts. Which of these is more impressive? What Chris Sale did? What Tariq Skubal did?
I'm going to lean towards Skubal. I think Skubal's outings were very impressive. I think what he did with the Tigers team that was sellers at one point, put them on his back and got them to the postseason. He helped lead that entire team's pitching staff to, I believe it was the 3rd best pitching ERA in all of baseball from August to the end of the season.
From the trade deadline,
which is super impressive. So I'm going to lean towards Skubal here, but not saying Sale didn't have a great year, but Skubal's was super impressive.
Yeah. I kind of feel like the dude made a little more starts with a not as good team around him. I kind of think that's maybe more of it. Not that there wasn't pressure on Sale, but I think Tariq Skubal was in a situation of you had to pitch well, because if you didn't, they're they're counting on you to win your games, because the rest of these outings are kind of a question, right? They did a lot of openers, a lot of bulk innings from bullpen guys. They had, I believe, after the trade deadline to the end of the year, they had the lowest innings from the starting rotation of any team in baseball. So I feel like the pressure was a little bit more on Sale. And it's hard to argue that the surrounding, like the talent around him, that Scubal's talent was arguably probably not as good as Atlanta's talent. As far as, Atlanta, even with all the injuries, you still had Matt Olson, you still had Marcell Ozuna, you had Michael Harris, you had a lot of these guys around him for a good portion of the season. Whereas in Detroit for a while, you had, Javi Baez. You had guys that were sent down for non-performance like Spencer Torkelson and things like that. So I kind of think it probably has, Scubal's probably more impressive. And again, we'll see what happens if Sale has to pitch today or not. Sale has the ERA lead. Skubal has the strikeout lead. Those could conceivably both change if we see Sale have to go in game 2 today. So I think we have a most underrated player in MLB. It feels like it's Jose Ramirez. He finishes 1 home run short of a 40-40 season. He bats .279 this year for the Cleveland Guardians. 39 homers, 41 stolen bases, and 118 RBI. Is there a player in baseball more underrated than Jose Ramirez?
If there is one, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but Jose Ramirez has been incredible this season. He goes to 39-41 in only 161 games because they canceled that game yesterday, Lindsay. So you have to assume that he was going to hit 40-40.
Yeah. And he had a couple days off. He only played in 158.
That's super impressive. And that's just adding more to the impressiveness of Ramirez. I will say this. I don't know if it's the fact because Cleveland's a small market or that he's just not thought of when you look at other players in the league. AL Central, not a lot of people think of, but I think we need to start paying more attention to the Cleveland Guardians and Jose Ramirez. And I would not be shocked if he puts the nation on notice in the postseason this year for the Cleveland Guardians when they go up next series, because they have a bye. I know not a lot of people are talking about the Cleveland Guardians, but that's a team right now that is in the postseason, but they will not be playing on Tuesday because they are going to wait for another team. They are the 2nd seed in the American League. Super impressive. Jose Ramirez is a big part of that.
Yeah, some of the Jose Ramirez stats I don't quite think we pay attention to here. Some of the awards. He's got 4 Silver Sluggers, 6 All-Star selections, and this number's going to go up this year. He has 7 MVP finishes, including 4 times inside the top 5, and another finish at 6. And it feels like every generation has that one dude who's consistently one of the top 3 or 5 or 7 players in baseball and is not considered to be at that point. Feels like Jose Ramirez is that for this generation.
And he's going to finish in the top 5 again in the AL this year. I can't think of 4 other players atop of him. You think Aaron Judge, you think Bobby Witt Jr., and then it depends on what kind of votes they're going to get.
He's probably the 3. He probably should be the 3. He's not going to be, but he probably should be the 3 in the AL behind all of that because he's a very good defender. I mean, he is the 10th highest active fielding percentage at third base of any player that's active in MLB right now. But he led in double plays turned at third base. He's a lot better than he gets credit for. And I think that's kind of the big takeaway here.
Okay. Yep. I'm with
Final story from over the weekend that we never really just had a chance to get to. Couldn't squeeze it in because the shows always ran long. Kenley Jansen went on the injured list over the weekend. Something he pitched his final game was he came into a game where they were leading by a lot. He came in, he pitched the 9th inning and an 8-1 win on the 22nd over the Twins. And went on the IL soon after that. I think it was a shoulder. He went home. He went ahead. He didn't stay for the end of the season. Most players on the injured list are still around the team every day, even if they're not going to come back. They're on the team every day. They're getting treatment, things like that. He went ahead and packed up and went home. We saw some stories come out from Boston over the weekend. His nameplate was taken off of his locker. They just kind of they they gave his locker to somebody else. A lot of his teammates expressed frustration with him leaving early. It wasn't any sort of like emergency that we know of situation. He just went back home to California. Uh, how do we feel about a team? The postseason is out of the picture. They've been eliminated. His contract is expiring. He's guaranteed not going to be back next year. How do we feel about Kenley Jansen just leaving early and going home?
Yeah, at first it was definitely a weird scenario, and it definitely doesn't rub people the right way for sure. And you're trying to get a roster spot, I'm sure, for next year. I don't think Kenley Jansen's retiring going into next season. But then there was a little bit more updates that came out. The Boston Globe's Alex Spear came out just a
Mhm.
few days ago, or was it yesterday maybe, and said that Alex Cora actually told Jansen to go home, and if that upsetted anybody, then they need to go talk to him. So that cleared up a little bit. But either way, it's still not the best look on the team. And if they wanted to get ahead of that, they probably should have made that a little bit more public, and they did not. So yeah, it's just a weird way to end the season for Boston. Just a weird season for Boston. Period.
Yeah. A story published this morning from NESN. The quote here from Cora is, I told Kenley to go home. If they're upset, they should come to my office and ask me. We talked during the other stuff that's going on with Kenley too. But the manager decided for him, hey, we're out of it. So if you want to go home, you go home. And he went home. Definitely an odd situation here. But also talking about the Red Sox, you mentioned how weird the season was. And for the folks who are super on this 30-minute thing, I apologize. We're a little bit over on this. But there's this really odd thing here where the Red Sox have been flirting around 500 all year, right? They've been 70 and 70. They've been 40 and 40. They've been third, like they've been flirting right around, and they finish 81 and 81. Is this one? We agree this is weird, but do you see a path to being more competitive next year? And or is this just this was a fluke, or is this who Boston is? They're destined to be the fourth or fifth place team in the division.
No, I think there's definitely a path for Boston to improve, and they have a pretty decent pitching staff, and they have a lot of young players, and I think they have too many young players to actually fill some voids here. I think they're going to be very active. I would not be surprised if Boston is one of the most active teams this winter to try and improve their squad. And to me, this is the most unexciting third place American League East team we've had in quite some time. I will not be surprised in 2025 that they're battling with the Yankees and Orioles um, for maybe not the top spot in the American League, but they will be back in the wild card race next year if they do what I think they're going to do this winter.
This division is going to be so interesting as far
Mhm.
as next year. You have the big question for, is Juan Soto coming back to the Yankees and all of that. We'll start doing team by team breakdowns over the offseason, probably after the postseason's concluded, looking at each team, the decisions they have to make, and things like that. And this to me is the most intriguing because you can see a path for probably four of these teams to get back into contention next year. And I'm really curious to see what happens. Um, okay, this has been First Pitch for Monday, September 30th. We are not going away for the postseason. We will have a postseason preview show tomorrow when we know the four teams that are actually in, or sorry, when we know which National League teams are actually in, and we have all the matchups. Until then, if you're listening on audio, do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, when we drop our new episode, and leave a comment down below. And either way, tell your friends about it. Until next time, this has been First Pitch.